Day 229 of the Ukrainian war map, also known as the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Chelsea here, and today is another quick update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine today. And as always, I like to start off with some of those Russian military losses. So we'll have a look here. And so here we go. So always just a bit of an estimate, but different format today as well, as you might notice. And I'll start off with the Russian military personnel losses. So today, an additional 370 losses. And also in terms of the military hardware, now you can see 9 tanks, which is a pretty big deal, 16 AVCs as well, always quite the big deal there as well. And within these figures today, quite most expensively or impressively, a Russian military jet too, which I'll show you in just a moment. And so what we'll do is we'll jump back across to the map and we'll have a look here. So starting off outside of the Ukrainian borders today is in the Rostov Oblast in Russia, where a Russian Su-24 fighter plane crashed in this oblast earlier today. Although they're not meant to land like this. These warplane losses must be getting pretty significant for Russia now. It's not as if they can just build replacements easily or potentially at all. Due to the complexities of international supply chain requirements, a market Russia no longer really has access to due to some impressive sanctions imposed on the country now. Then also on the map in the Russian motherland itself, just north of Moscow. Now, we've got a photo and some footage here of a TV tower burning in Moscow there. I'm reminded pretty instantly of is it the Eye of Mordor from Lord of the Rings series there? But seriously, I looked into it, and that actually happens to be the Ostenkino TV broadcasting tower, which means Russian propaganda is on fire today. Now, I'm not ready to make another Sergei the Smoker joke, truly. It's so overused, but overused only because of the really regular occurrence of locations within the Russian motherland itself just constantly seem to be spontaneously combusting over the last few months. It's just very odd. Now, moving really back into the Ukrainian borders themselves, there's been what would amount to a Russian retaliation attack of missile strikes throughout a great deal of Ukraine today. And this could certainly be considered retribution as a result of the recent Crimean Kerch Strait Bridge explosion in the Russian-occupied region of Crimea. And included in all of this were multiple Russian strikes in the capital of Kyiv. And multiple explosions were seen and recorded, some of which close to the downtown of the capital of Kyiv there as well. Where, for instance, a Russian Kh-101 cruise missile hit basically right next to a playground. And in this particular instance here, even locals in the area communicated their confusion at what Russia was trying to hit here. So in particular, the Kh-101 missile. So the Russian manufacturer of this missile has labeled it as a type that is highly accurate weaponry with advanced guidance systems. But like so much of the Russian military equipment, it appears not to be as good as it's cracked up to be. And I think I'm really starting to see a pattern of these Russian military manufacturers skimping on the R&D, so the research and development, and producing equipment that's not exactly what it ought to be. Now, it should of course be said, never underestimate your opponent in war, but some aspects of the Russian war machine clearly to date have been overestimated, let's say. And as a result of all this, there were air defenses active, quite certainly active, in the Kyiv region today. And we'll move a little bit across today back to Kiev, or really the eastern side. Kupiansk or Kharkiv, and really the eastern side, which is the Luhansk Oblast there. Just pop open the date map and see if there's any changes. There was a little bit of a change, so really starting to move into the direction of taking Svatov or Svatove and Crimean and everything in between. We're talking logistics, supply lines, things of that nature there. Now, more so in this region where the heavy action is at would be, for instance, starting off in, well, near Donetsk city. Russian forces actually launched an unsuccessful assault southwest of the city there. Now, where it's getting pretty difficult, I'd have to say, is Bakhmut, where they have really truly been razing it to the ground. Now, Bakhmut's been under quite some heavy fire for many, many months now. It's never been taken. It's always stayed in Ukrainian control. But such a vast majority of residents have left this location just because of the real state of events here at the moment. And to be fair, I'll open up the date map and have a look here, because there were some small pushes from the Russian side here in the last day. So those two spots there. So there's a bit of a Russian push on the east side of the city of Bakhmut. About 4 square kilometers or 1.5 square miles of ground taken from the Russian forces, of which it's very well known the Russian Wagner militia group are stationed here and have been stationed here for some time. It looks like their main goal, I mean, obviously, is to take the remainder of the Donbass, but one of their key next strategic goals is to take Bakhmut. But they, of course, they haven't been successful to date. And moving across further into the south center region, so Zaporizhia, no stranger to strikes, had about an additional 10 or so strikes overnight. Again, potentially as retaliation from the recent Crimean bridge explosion. And I really can't help but think or get this visual in my head of Russia chucking a tantrum as a result of that explosion there in the last probably 24 to 36 hours now at the bridge. Or as I call it in my region, chucking a tanty. Then we'll move across to the Kherson Oblast and really the front line there. So, that was a small gain, that's right, or a small push into sort of the mid-rift section, as I like to call it. Now, just in terms of this north section, really, this is the intensification, the contact point, the front line right there, where the Ukrainian sources reported that Russian forces continued to target newly liberated settlements in the northern Kherson Oblast here with artillery, MLRS, which stands for a multiple launch rocket system. Now, a short while ago, in fact, if we zoom in here, we've got Dadchany, we've got Milov or My Love. It has been said, now this is unconfirmed, but right here, Sablukivka and Kachkarivka are actually said to be in the grey zone now. So, in fact, this map is probably going to start updating in the next few hours or so, just after the recording of this video. It sometimes does. But either way, yeah, it's said to be in the grey zones. So, in other words, Ukrainian forces pushing through further south. But also, some of the heaviest fighting in the last 24 hours is occurring along the Inulets River, right here. Not the least of which is the point of the bridge, which is the most useful crossing point in all of the Inulets River there. That bridge effectively was taken out effectively some time ago. But there are pontoons and other attempts from the Russian side. So when I say Russian side, we've really got two Russian sides here. We've got half of them, let's say, stuck on the west northern bank, and let's say just very roughly the other half on the east northern bank. That's actually not quite accurate, but what is said to be more accurate is calling for backup and support from the west to the east. It's a very difficult job for the Russian forces to do at the moment there. And in terms of strategy at the moment, so for the Ukrainian armed forces, the strategy here is very likely to corridor or cut off the northern bank Russian forces on that northern bank there from any southern crossing points. And I mean, we've known this for some time, a while now. We have high precision Excalibur shells or HIMARS missile strikes on the bridges so that the northern bank Russian forces cannot get resupplied or retreat for that matter, thus trapping these forces, and then a war of attrition quickly ensues. Now the Russian forces could certainly hold out for maybe the short, even to the midterm, on this northern bank, but due to the Ukrainian forces' constant barrage of high-precision strikes at those river crossing points I've just mentioned, it's only a matter of time before Russia has to cede so much of this land. Oh, and the actual reason why multiple Russian battalions are still stationed here, indicated by the Oinky Pigs, is because Putin effectively forced his Ministry of Defense to hold the front line at this location, pretty much at all costs. Now, going back in time, it was quite well documented a few weeks ago that Putin received the recommendation from his generals to withdraw the entirety of his troops here from this northern bank section. But Putin is a real go-getter and doesn't want to take the advice of almost any of his ministers now, many reports are now suggesting or indicating. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that the Russian army generals or ministers give a lot of good advice to Putin, anyway, for war tactics. After all, they likely told him that they could easily take Ukraine and the capital Kiev in 3 to 7 days, which obviously turned out to be nowhere near true. But that's just the point, really. These advisors to Russian President Vladimir Putin are likely just a bunch of yes-men subordinate to Putin that are too scared most of the time to speak truth to power in this autocratic political system that they are just subjected to, effectively, where they're afraid that Putin will just purge them if they don't follow party lines. So in the end, bad decisions ultimately get made in these types of autocratic systems, militarily speaking, which I believe will be one of the core reasons for Putin and Russia's undoing and defeat long term. But I digress. And for this region, in fact, 4 tanks and 3 ammunition depots were eliminated in Kherson alone in the last 24-hour reporting period. Always a lot of action and Russian military losses down in this south region here. Now I'll move across on the map to the Crimean Peninsula at Yevpatoria. There was another explosion and fire reported in this region here. Got a quick photo of that one there. Likely a Ukrainian military strike, but I hope to find out more about that one soon. Then we'll head up some news for the day. So Russian President Vladimir Putin accused Ukraine of blowing up the Crimean bridge a day after the attack. Putin said Ukrainian intelligence, quote unquote, was behind the explosion that damaged the strategic bridge that connects Russia with occupied Crimea. And it is indeed a strategic bridge for railway cargo, military cargo to pass through the south. It's the you could say it's the one and only main option for bringing across military hardware to support the front line. Of course, and I've mentioned this in other videos, we do have other railway lines that Russia can use, but they're just too easily within striking distance by the Ukrainian armed forces. So quite risky, really. Which certainly, as a result of all this, puts quite the hampering on Russia's partial military mobilization. Even if they can find the people to mobilize, which indeed they're having issues with, they couldn't even supply them because of these issues at the moment, certainly on the south end. And in some other news, the Ukrainian General Staff said that Russia is trying to buy ammo from third countries. So basically, Russia's leadership from the military standpoint is trying to find resources to continue its war. And Russia is said to be currently negotiating with other countries to buy artillery shells, mortars, and certain components for rocket launcher systems too. And in some other news relating to Slovakia, which, if we have a look close on the map, we can see it actually touches borders with Ukraine. So Slovakia has provided the Ukrainian military with 2 more Zuzunas. So these are the 155mm self-propelled howitzers, really big guns on wheels, bringing the total amount that Ukraine has of these bad boys now up to 6. And it's also said that 18 are effectively on order to arrive in 2023. Now, this is big news for a lot of reasons, but not the least of which is, and for whatever reason, I don't know these ones that well, but the Zuzuna 2s is what they're called, is said to be one of the best howitzers in the world. Combination of armor and firepower with a good build. Now, certainly a bit of a shorter video today, guys, but I'll round it off with a couple of funnies or so. So this first one here is a news clip about a captured Russian soldier in Ukraine that claimed to have joined the Russian forces to pay off a tank game related debt. I found this news clip instantly funny because effectively the Russian soldier traded in playing a tank game within the safety of his own home to instead very likely getting some real world or real life tank experience. And in another quick funny, this is some footage. We see a train line with a couple of tanks being transported on it, presumably to go to the front line in Ukraine. So a Russian tank. But Russian train with tanks. But on closer inspection, you see the green military garb uniformed Russian soldiers transported like cattle in train wagon carts, almost like being sent to the cattle slaughter. So I had to quickly pop that one in there. And lastly, last funny, I really had to pop this one in. We've got some good news for the Russian conscripts. The Russian government found good cotton wool clothes for winter use for the soldiers from 1937. And that's not even joking. Basically, the State Duma Deputy Andrei Kolesnik, proposed to issue these old warehouse-stored quilted jackets to the newly mobilizing Russian servicemen. Now, Kolesnik explained that the modern Russian soldier winter wear, by contrast, quote-unquote, turns into glass in the cold instead. He and other parliamentarians emphasized that they had in the previous Soviet era fought in quilted jackets, saying, again, quote-unquote, they were comfortable enough. And I've got a bit of a little bit gruesome photo that I won't show. Basically, these were the same uniforms that many of their ancestors, or Soviet comrade Russian ancestors, froze to death in during the Winter War, which was way back in 1939 at the Finnish border. So it doesn't seem like they're up to par, and with their Russian soldier winter gear needs. But hey, maybe this 100-year-old winter gear is fine. Either way, I'm really quite interested to see what happens in just the next 2 months when it starts to reach some of the really cold part of the season there. 60 days. Okay, so that's about it, guys. Thanks for watching. Please leave a comment, subscribe, hit that like button, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers.